Since the ending of Season 3 all the way back in July of 2019, it goes without saying that fans of Stranger Things have been waiting in anticipation for its 4th season to arrive. And with the release of recent teasers containing some strange symbols, questions are plentiful. Like, what does the old grandfather clock mean? And how far back does this mystery go? Well, for all this and more, stay right where you are. What old grandfather clock? Before we jump right into the answers you've been seeking, let's reflect back on where these questions actually came from. Not everyone spends their days staring at teaser material after all. So for those of you who haven't been paying much attention to the latest Season 4 releases, time has been a pretty big symbol throughout. And nowhere do we see this better than the Creel House trailer that was released around a week ago. It's in this trailer that we're introduced to a classic American family who appears to be living somewhere in the 1950s. After moving into their new home, the family come to experience some strange events, similar to what Joyce Byers went through back in Season 1. Flash forward around 30 years later, and we see our titular heroes breaking into the home, which is now pretty run down. After some dialogue showing that the Creel house holds some secrets, the trailer gets even more mysterious when it begins to focus on an old grandfather clock. And when the clock finally dings for the first time, the room around it changes quite drastically. Now, with a foggy interior and reddish blue glint, there's no doubt about it. We're in the upside down. But what does all this mean? There's only one way to find out. So let's take a look at some of the most popular fan theories floating around at the moment. Number 1. The grandfather clock has everything to do with the show's release date. Although filming and post-production of Season 4 has wrapped up, executive producer Sean Levy has been quite secretive about when we can expect this new installment to finally grace our screens. We know that this will be somewhere in 2022, as this is the only specific information the Creel House trailer ended up giving us. Absolutely nothing has been said about the actual release date of this continuation of the franchise, though. That being said, fans of Stranger Things have come to believe that the showrunners have included the grandfather clock as some kind of Easter egg, hinting at the fact that the season is due to release come New Year's Day of 2022. This wouldn't be the first time that the Duffer Brothers have hidden an Easter egg in teaser trailers for the fanbase to discover, and makes sense how the show has a tendency to release during some or other holiday. But what specifically led fans to this conclusion? Well, the grandfather clock in question is ticking closer and closer to 12 o'clock, since the only time a countdown like this is truly celebrated is on New Year's Eve, when we all get together with friends and family to count down into the new year. The evidence seems pretty solid. Number 2, the possible link to 11. That being said, the grandfather clock could actually have something to do with the plot of the show, with some eagle-eyed fans realizing that its first hand is actually on the 3 just after it cracks. This is curious and has led to a subtle connection between the second teaser trailer and the Creel house. You see, in the second teaser trailer, we got to see a little more of 11 back when she was under the control of Dr. Martin Renner at the Hawkins lab. Funny enough, a clock on the wall of the laboratory also reads 3 o'clock. Does this mean that whatever happened in the Hawkins lab that day had something to do with the murder of the Creel family? Well, we know that Dr. Brenner was using 11's immense powers to try and spy on the Russians at the time, and we know that her telepathic powers have something to do with the Upside Down, which is where she was able to locate Will in the first place. In other words, it could very well be that a misuse of 11's powers not only resulted in the opening of a gateway to the Upside Down in Hawkins, but a number of places spread across the region, with one of these places being the Creel house. Number 3, the grandfather clock is the gateway. This isn't the only theory that depends on the connection between that fateful day and the Creel house murders, though. The fact that both clocks struck 3 o'clock must mean that there is something important about that specific time, and since Dr. Brenner was responsible for the opening of the gateway to the Upside Down, some fans have come to assume that the grandfather clock in the Creel house was actually an early instance of an upside down gate. In fact, from studying the workings of the clock, Brenner could have discovered the need for time in the upside down and right side up to sync up before a gateway could be created. And while we're assuming quite a bit here, it could very well be the case that this synchronization only happens once every day, at 3 o'clock in the morning. This obviously calls into question the link between Mr. Creel and Dr. Brenner, with some noticing a bit of a similarity between the two of them. Could it be that Dr. Brenner is Mr. Creel and became obsessed with the Upside Down after getting possessed by the Mind Flayer and killing his family due to the mysterious effects of the grandfather clock? The whole purpose behind Brenner's interest in this otherworldly dimension has never been explained before, so this would be a pretty great way to go about it. That being said, there isn't much to back this theory up at the moment. Number 4, the clock has everything to do with time travel. And then we have the most prominent theory currently being shared within the Stranger Things community. According to a massive number of fans and theorists, the constant display of clocks throughout the Season 4 teaser materials has everything to do with time travel. And considering how our heroes have dimension hopped in the past, this isn't exactly a far cry from what we're used to on the show, as crazy as it may seem at first. In fact, the Upside Down has already been explained as being a parallel universe that distorts both space and time. And since we're stuck exploring the origin and end of the Creel family in the latest teaser trailer, which takes place somewhere in the 1950s, time travel sounds like a pretty solid way of connecting the events of that time with the testing of Eleven at the Hawkins lab. Remember, when Eleven infiltrated Billy's mind at the end of season 3, we saw her looking right into his memories of his mother. This allowed her to convince him to fight against the Mind Flayer, essentially saving her friends from death. So as it turns out, our titular teenager has already time traveled, albeit in a telepathic way. Could time travel be used more physically this time around? Now that Eleven's powers have seemingly dissipated with the removal of the Mind Flayer tadpole though, we know that she's going to have to find a way to get them back. And many have been theorizing that the time travel reference in the season 4 teaser trailers actually has a lot to do with Eleven's continued story arc. Could our heroes be using the mysterious grandfather clock to travel to a time when Eleven was still being experimented on? This would allow them to discover how she was taught to harness her powers for the first time, something she clearly needs help with in the lead up to the fight against the Mind Flayer. The group will be useless without her telepathic or telekinetic prowess after all, and we assume that this journey will take up the majority of the runtime of the season. That being said, since the Upside Down distorts both time and space, the group could also make use of the gateway to infiltrate the Russian prison that Hopper is being held at. They'll first have to discover that their favorite sheriff is alive though, which requires Eleven to harness her powers once more and boost up her daughterly connection with the man again. At least that's what the theory suggests. Number 5. The Upside Down is actually the future. Last but not least, honorable mention must be given to the theory that the Upside Down isn't actually a parallel universe at all, but a grim vision of the future. And since season 4 is going to be taking place during the disastrous Chernobyl meltdown, an event that could have very well spun out of control and radiated the entire world with upside down material, this isn't a stretch to imagine. But what the grandfather clock has to do with this situation, we'll have to see for ourselves when the season finally releases sometime in 2022. And there you have it, everything fans think they know about the mysterious grandfather clock. What do you think it symbolizes though? And which theory do you believe in? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below.